Evening, everyone. I'm Mayor Brenda Hess. I'd like to call our regular City Commission meeting to order. It's Monday, September 10th, 2018. It's now 7 o'clock p.m. If everyone would please rise and join us in saying the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. You may be seated. This evening, our invocation will be led by Pastor Dave Mitchell of Faith Victory Fellowship. Pastor Dave.
Father, we thank you for a beautiful day. Father, we thank you for our hearts lifted up, for the remembrance tomorrow for 9/11. Father God, I thank you for a city that you have blessed. And Father, all the residents that find this place a place to raise families. Thank you for the business being done tonight, that you would give strength, you would give wisdom, and you would lead it in your gracious name. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you, Pastor Dave. And with that, we'll have the roll call.
Commissioner Cole? Here. Commissioner Moore? Here. Commissioner Turney?
Here.
Commissioner Viancy?
Yes.
Mayor Hess?
Here.
You have a quorum.
Thank you. And with that, we're on item number 4, public comments. Citizens are allowed up to 3 minutes to discuss any agenda item. Please come up to the microphone, state your name as well as your address.
William Haas, 1315 State Line Road, Niles, Michigan. You guys have the review coming up for the medical marijuana ordinance. I came up here on behalf of Redbud Roots. You know, we started all this stuff together. A lot of the things that I said we were going to do, we've accomplished out there. I think we've proven ourselves very well. But along with what the state is doing right now for Buchanan to remain competitive in this industry, we would like to have the opportunity to have more licensing in the facilities that we already have. We're not asking to expand our square footage. We already have the capacity to do more. This will not only allow more revenue from the application fees and from the part that you guys get from the state, but this allows us to hire more people from Buchanan. So, you know, without this, it's very detrimental to Redbud Roots as a company. If we don't get this, this means we got to start looking into other cities to pop up more grows so we can still keep our business going. Because some of the companies that are coming in out there are pretty substantial. These guys, there's some people that are going in for 10 Class C licenses. So, and we don't want to get rolled over. You know, we've put a lot of money into Buchanan already. We're looking to do a lot more in the future, and I hope you guys will consider the stacking possibilities. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, with that, it looks like we don't have anyone else for public comments. We'll move on to item 5, consent calendar. I need a motion and a second.
I'll make that motion that we go with the consent calendar as is.
Okay,
I'll second.
okay, roll call.
I
Oh,
have a couple
Commissioner
questions.
Viganski? Yes.
I'd like to know what Commissioner Cole's excuse is for missing the meeting.
I was out of town.
Okay.
It was a little more extensive when they had to excuse me, but I guess that's going to have to be okay. And then I'd like to I'd like to make a motion actually to forgive check number 77549 in the amount of $666.67 from the DDA to the City Hall.
Commissioner Turney?
Well, I'd just like to make mention to Commissioner Vidansky that I had spoke to Barbara from the DDA. The DDA has given you no authority to make these continuing requests each month for that particular check. And it's also a budgeted item, so you cannot change anything that's already into the budget for the DDA. Thank you.
Okay. Do I have a second on Commissioner
No, I already
Begins?
have we already have a motion and support on the floor.
Okay, all right. Vote, please. Roll call.
Commissioner Cole,
Yes.
Commissioner Moore,
Yes.
Commissioner Turney,
Yes.
Commissioner Viancy,
Yes.
Mayor Hess,
Yes,
motion carries.
thank you. And with that, we're moving on to item 6, reports by departments, committees, and boards. This evening, we'll be hearing from Samantha Blevins from our Fine Arts Council. Samantha, come right on up. All right, Megan.
Okay. She's gonna follow. All right, we were able to have a meeting and change our officers around a little bit this past Saturday. So we are now co-chairs, as well as our vice chair, which is Julie Blaylock. What were we starting with? What?
Ticket pricing.
Oh, we've got a lot of new things happening at the Tin Shop this year. We got a lot of great things happening. One of the things we've been working on for the past couple years, actually, is our ticketing system. It's very outdated. It's very cash only or checks. I don't know how many people can actually pay with a check anymore. Not a lot of places. But we're finally going to be able to use credit cards, debit cards, that type of thing, which is amazing. We'll be able to do ticket sales online. Getting a little bit more advanced. We just got Wi-Fi down at the Tin Shop, so now we can get a little bit more technical with our shows. Pretty awesome. So hopefully that will be completely done and ready for our 2019 season, which is coming up. What else we got? Also upgrades, we have now got LED lights in the Tin Shop, which gives us a lot more range as well as being more cost efficient for the overall price of electricity at the Tin Shop. Our old lights are very outdated. They're very heavy. Nobody wants to move them. They're usually about 30 to 50 pounds just to lift up one, and they're about 20 feet above your head. So we're finally down to more stationary. You can pinpoint a lot more, which I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with like the whole lighting setup, but you can do more colors, you can do more effects, make it more presentable. It really increases the quality of our productions. We're finally coming into this century on lights. What else we got?
I got the next couple.
Go ahead.
So coming up for the Tin Shop, the Make a Difference Day, volunteers have asked us if we wanted any help with anything. So of course we said yes, because as a community theater, we always need improvements. So the Make a Difference Day is October 13th, and it's at 8 o'clock in the morning. I'm not sure how long it goes. So if you want to volunteer and help out with the theater or any of the other places that they're offering to at the theater, we're working on cleaning up some things, possibly working on something outside. It kind of just
Our
depends on
garden.
the weather.
Yep.
Yeah, the garden and then the ceiling of the sidewalk.
So hope it doesn't rain. Hope it doesn't rain.
If not, there's other stuff that can
Yes,
do.
yes. We have a
Right.
whole upstairs that can be organized.
This Saturday, we also talked about our 2019 season. So we got an idea of what shows we're going to do. We can't release the names of the shows yet because we don't have the rights, but we have a good lineup. We have a comedy, a drama, a thriller, a musical, and of course the children's production. So I think that we'll have a good season.
Once we get the rights, we can actually release it, and everybody will be excited.
Yeah. They don't like it when we, say we're going to do shows and then
Don't do them, yeah.
yeah. And then our current show that we have going on right now, it just had its first weekend, and then this upcoming weekend will be its closing weekend, and it is August of Osage County. It is an adult drama. It has adult content and strong language, but it is a very good show. It is about 3 hours and 20 minutes long with 2 10-minute intermissions. So if anyone is interested, please come check it out this weekend. I think it opens Thursday, too.
Yes,
doesn't it?
Thursday, yep. We have
Thursday to
4 shows
Sunday.
this weekend.
And that is everything I have.
That pretty much sums up what we've been working on.
Right.
right.
How much are tickets?
We've actually upped our prices this year, trying to keep up with the costs of the productions. We are still cheaper than most theaters around us. Adult prices right now are $12 a ticket. We have our seniors and students at $10, and then we have our children's tickets, I believe, at
But
$5
they shouldn't
still.
go to this show.
But don't bring them to the current show. Bring them to the show after that.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
But we do actually have a couple more shows coming up in the season. We've also got Leading Ladies, which is a comedy. I believe it's suitable for everyone. Somebody will find a little amusement in all of it. It is comedy. Then we've got our what is it? Our Charles Dickens Readers Theater, which will be available to move around the city as it comes up. We've got a couple performances set for that. It'll show up right after the tree lighting ceremony. We've got it especially for that. It's going to all of the costumes, all of the Christmas spirit, all of the stories you already know. And then we've got one night of all the holiday tips and tricks to survive the holidays.
And for the Charles Dickens one, Alice Kring is in charge of that one, so if anyone wants a performance done at something they're affiliated with, she would be the one to get in contact with about that. So.
Right. Anyone? Any questions, comments? Thank you, ladies,
Thank
very
you.
much.
Thank you for allowing us to be here.
All right. And with that, we'll hear this evening from our assessor, Mindy Cole-Cracker. Mindy?
Hello, everybody. Okay, give you just an updated report, things that have been going on with the office. First, we did conduct our July Board of Review. Members Brenda Hess, Carla Cole, and Margaret Young all attended. Would like to point out that we are going to lose Brenda and Carla potentially before our next December Board of Review. So I will be asking the city manager and/or commission to appoint 2 new members to the Board of Review so that we can conduct, and just to make everybody aware that that's coming up. We do have to have 2 members, at least 2 members, to have a quorum. The only real stipulation is that the board members must be taxpayers within the city to serve. So I continue to review and field visit the building permits and update values, as well as all residential, commercial, and industrial property. Still verifying and entering all new sales as they come through, and then continue to canvass for new personal property. The AMAR, or Audit of Minimum Assessing Requirements, is coming up in 2019, and you have a resolution this evening on your agenda with regard to that. So that resolution is to waive penalties for non-filing of property transfer affidavits with regard to MCL 21127B. And what that says is that if you don't have a policy to collect, that you have to have a waiver. The whole point of that waiver is the state says you have 45 days to file a property transfer affidavit every time that there's a sale. If it goes past 45 days, the city could potentially charge $5 a day, up to $200. We've had 0 since I've been here. It doesn't happen very often. But the AMAR, or the audit, when they come in, will say you will either have a policy that says you're going to collect this and determine how you're going to do it, how you're going to collect it and get that money in, or have the waiver in the form of a resolution that says you're covered. So that's what that is for. Also, with the AMAR, there's standard operating procedures that I am implementing at this point for the collection of interest for the denial of a primary residence exemption. So there's a form 4012 or something that the state once filled out, and it determines who gets the interest money. We have not filled those out. As a rule, the county does that for us. So I've got a form that just says county's been handling it in the event that we would ever do it, you know, that we would implement it at that time. But again, that's something that happens very infrequently. Also working on procedures and policies for all poverty exemptions, or excuse me, all property exemptions. We currently have a policy for a poverty exemption, and you folks update the guidelines for that every year based on the federal guidelines. So that updates, but I have to have something for every single property exemption. So any municipal, any religious, you know, and there's a form that I'll send out, and they can actually cite what portion of the law that they are claiming and why they should receive it, so that I can verify it, and then I also have to audit it periodically. So that will satisfy the state for that. And then I also have to have basically a sheet that says how I canvass personal property. How do I determine there's new personal property, and how do I go about getting it on the roll? So basically a new business comes into town, and the county gives me a new number, and we send them a form, but they want that on a piece of paper. So continue to work on that. I've not been given a specific time frame, but all I do know is that it will be in 2019. So we continue to work for that. Also, Just want to make mention, coming down the pipe is assessing reform legislation. So there is proposed legislation, and that's going to be under House Bill 6049 and Senate Bill 1025, and these could potentially change assessing for every single unit in the state. While the exact verbiage in the bills hasn't been finalized, there are items for concern. Primary one being that they are proposing that all assessors of record be a level 3 or a level 4. I am currently a level 2. Right now, that's all the state says you have to have for Berrien County to be able to certify a role. A level 3 requires another year in Lansing. It's not something that I can obtain, but this is certainly going to add more cost to every municipality in the state. Also, they are proposing that each assessing entity have a minimum of 5,000 parcels and generate up to a minimum of $12 million in property tax. And if you're not meeting that, then they want you to consolidate and create an entity to meet that requirement. This could also mean that the county could once again be doing the assessing. Also, it's proposing that counties that provide assessing services have a level 4 assessor. No regard to value, it's just you will have a level 4. Personally, they're shooting themselves in the foot. There aren't enough of us now. So I don't know where they're going to get us all to cover that. And then also they're proposing that all assessing entities provide full-time service hours. At whose expense? So these are just proposals. It's not been confirmed. Let's see. These reforms will increase costs for smaller entities as well as take away your local control. And there's no data that supports quantity thresholds like the 5,000 equate to quality assessing. There's no data to prove that. More assessors are already needed, and there's already a statewide shortage even of level 2s. There just aren't enough people going in to assessing. So there's been a huge pushback, obviously. Nick Khoury, the state treasurer, has had, along with the gentlemen that are proposing these bills, have traveled the state. They've had 3 separate locations where they've come in and given people an opportunity to come and speak as to maybe not necessarily why they shouldn't do it, or obviously why they shouldn't, but maybe propose things that would work better, other solutions. So I can say at this point that I just came from a Michigan Township Association board meeting last Friday. The proposed verbiage is not what's anticipated that they will pass. They're going to make changes, but what those look like right now, we don't know. They may vote on this before the end of the year. So I told you what I know, and that's all they've put out there at this point. The thinking is that most likely the requirements, the 5,000 parcels and 12 million, that's not going to be something they implement. We're hoping it's going to be more performance-based, because there are a lot of entities that are already passing their AMAR tests or, audits. So the question is, why penalize? If they're already proving that they can do it, why take it away? But we'll see what comes through when they take it through. So with that, the state required assessor continuing education. I myself have completed 20 hours already this year for the 2019 year. I'm only required to do 16, but I'm also continued to attend training through the county because they always offer some cool stuff, and it's always something out there to learn. So also in an effort to maintain the proposed state requirement, I am seriously considering leveling up next year, which means a year in training and then several Saturdays in a classroom setting in Lansing. So just so it doesn't mean that it's set in stone. Obviously, I have to apply and go through all of that, but that's based on their proposed reform, but we'll see what happens. After that, I'm in the office on Tuesdays. You can always get a hold of me anytime through my cell phone. It's on my card. Anybody needs anything, people can get me that way too. So, and that
Any
is all I
questions
have.
from the board?
Not the thing.
Thank you, Mindy.
Thank
We
you.
really
Thank you.
appreciate it.
Absolutely, thank you.
All right, and with that, we'll move on to unfinished business, and this evening we have none. That moves us along to item 8, new business. We're going to look at letter A, Resolution 2018.09175, Property Transfer Affidavit Fee Waiver, which we just heard a little bit about from Mindy.
Mayor and Commissioners, You just heard the explanation for the waiver, the need. If we don't offer the alternative, we have to supply the waiver. If you need any further questions,
Well,
I can have Mindy come back up.
I'll make the motion that we approve the property tax affidavit fee waiver, because we don't have a resolution number yet there.
I'll support.
Okay, roll call, please.
Commissioner Viancy,
Yes.
Commissioner Attorney,
Yes.
Commissioner Moore,
Yes.
Commissioner Cole,
Yes.
Mayor Hess,
Yes,
motion carries.
thank you.
You're welcome.
Well, with that, we'll move on to item B, Resolution 2018.09/176, health insurance, 80%, 20%.
Mayor, Commissioners, this is kind of another housekeeping requirement we have to do annually where we identify, acknowledge to the state of Michigan under the publicly funded health insurance contribution Act, Act 152, that we are a community that has an 80-20 health insurance program, meaning that our employees pay 20% of whatever the premium is for their health insurances. And we have to acknowledge that through a resolution to the state.
Well, I'll make the motion that we approve that resolution for health insurance 80/20.
I'll support.
Okay, roll call, please.
Commissioner Moore,
Yes.
Commissioner Attorney,
Yes.
Commissioner Cole,
Yes.
Commissioner Viancy,
Yes.
Mayor Hess,
Yes,
motion carries.
thank you. And with that, we move on to item 9, public comment. Citizens are allowed up to 3 minutes to discuss any non-agenda item.
Cindy Benson, 212 Cecil Street, Buchanan. What is the date and time, if there is any set yet, for a candidate forum for the people who are running for the city seats on the council? I heard that there was going to be one from one of the people that's running, but I didn't hear about a date or a time.
I'm not personally aware. The city can't actually put one on, but a different entity can. Like the senior center could organize one. The Lions Club, other civic organizations can. The city itself can just not organize and conduct some form of
Okay,
debate.
that's all I wanted to know.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Hey,
But if I
thanks.
hear of something, I'll let you know. Okay, thank you.
Right from what? Can I say something?
Yeah, go right ahead. Commissioner Attorney?
Cindy, I remember once about 8 or 10 years ago, there was another commission where there was a lot of people running, and there was a form, but I don't know who put it together.
League of Women Voters often do it in larger cities.
Mhm.
We have one here.
Didn't Alice Green do it once?
Yeah, so,
I'll contact the senior center.
yeah,
Yes.
yeah,
We need it.
yeah, I believe you do.
Okay? Thank you. Yep, thank you.
David Mitchell. I just want to extend an invitation to the 9/11 service. We're having this as our 17th year that our community has held this event. And a lot of the communities around us have discontinued it, so it's a real good thing that we're behind our law enforcement, military, remembering that day. So, and my apologize to the mayor that her invitation got left out, but I
All right.
ask your forgiveness and thank you for being there.
Yes,
Because
you're
I have her
welcome.
doing the welcome, she's got to be there.
Yeah, right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
What time is that, Dave?
7 o'clock.
Okay.
That's correct.
Anyone else this evening for public comments? All right, with that, we'll move on to item 10, city manager's comments. Manager
Thank you,
Marks?
Mayor,
Yep.
Commissioners. In your packets this week, you'll get a copy of a very, very exciting letter from the state MDQ regarding our PFAS testing. PFAS is something that is actually has two chemicals that the state is looking for in our drinking water. And it goes under the heading of PFAS. It's a long, drawn-out name that I'll butcher if I try. But it is a concern to the MDEQ and the federal government about its accumulation in our water systems. It's a product that was generally used for the lining in popcorn bags. It was also used in firefighting foam. That was a large product in that those products. Paper mills were exclusive users of that product, and I think that was pretty evident to the community of Parchment. If you haven't been watching the news, the city of Parchment, the state came down after the PFAS testing and said that your testing at 1,400 parts per trillion exceeded the 70 parts per trillion threshold significantly. You can no longer drink your water. So you cannot use your water to cook with. You can use it to wash with and so on. So the city of Parchment had a rude awakening where they within 5 days hooked up to the community of Kalamazoo, city of Kalamazoo, for water service. Parchment was got caught into that situation where their water wells were within close proximity to a landfill that accepted a lot of paper mill products, and paper mills were a big user of this the two chemicals that are basically being evaluated across the state. Our area, I believe, was one of the last ones to be tested in the state. There are test results showing up for all over the state. Some are, again, are pretty high. Those communities are going to have to evaluate what they can do. I'm pleased to say that our testing numbers, which you'll see on the information I'll provide to you this week, is that our numbers were non-detectable. Okay, we didn't have a threshold to start from, so that's very good. So that, one community did get a 90 parts per trillion hit on their water, but they recognized that as they had a fire in a semi-truck up on one of their highways, and the fire department used a lot of foam to put the fire out, and it got into their aquifer that supplies the water for that community, and it boosted their number up. So the state's actually in an evaluation process trying to determine the levels that are out there, since this product is a bioaccumulator. It's somewhat like the mercury in fish. It'll continue to accumulate in our bodies, the fish, and so on. And to what extent it is a hazard, there's some opinions out there, but I think after Flint, the state is pretty cautious and fragile when it comes to contamination with water. So I am just, again, I'm very pleased that our water system was tested, and it tested as non-detectable, so we're good. And we'll get that information out on the Facebook page for general information, because I know some people are starting to understand and follow that issue. So Ross Sanders status, we've got the ceiling repaired in 2 locations in the eastern space that you agreed to lease to Guys and Dolls. We're hoping to get that tied up as early as tomorrow with painting and covering. We repaired a portion of the wall that had some leakage from an air conditioner that was in the window. We've got that repaired. So as soon as we get that sealed and painted, we'll be doing some cleanup. We have purchased the carpeting for the space. We will install that in-house by some of our DPW people who have a background in laying carpet and still have their tools to do so. We have an air conditioning question to pursue. We can easily buy a window air conditioner to put in that space. There's another type of unit that is kind of through the wall that might be a little better. We're trying to get a quote on that to see which is the better option for us. We do have some repair work on the sidewalk and the ramp going up to the front porch. We kind of evaluated that, and we want to, because that area is low and it pools water, we want to raise that sidewalk to help us with, to keep the ice off of it in the wintertime. So we're looking at maybe pouring an additional slab on top of what we have to facilitate the ramp going up to it. We have a little window well we're fabricating another cover over, but outside of that, we should be in pretty good shape. And I'm hoping at least ahead of the September 15th date, we're kind of earmarked as a chance for them to start moving in. I know they've been, Virginia has been in there with her plumber, and I don't know if she's contacted the electrician yet, but there is some electrical work she'll have to do. So that is moving along. So I want to thank Dave Mitchell again for the 911 event. Again, 17 years, and Dave's done all those 17 years. I know he's trying to transition it, the planning to someone else, and you know, unfortunately, the someone else got called back to full duty or back to his job, and that took a little bite out of that plan. But I'm hoping that, you know, by next year you'll be able to transfer that planning responsibility onto someone else. But I would like to thank you personally and as representative for the community for everything that you've done in putting this event together. Not too many communities do have a formal event, and it is quite moving. If you have not attended one of the events that will be put on tomorrow at our common, if you haven't attended that, you're missing a great opportunity. So let me, yeah, there was a question about the site plans for the 4th Street and Red Bud project. Matt Green is here from Whiteman. He did bring a set of plans for review. And Matt, do you want to kind of present them or have a little you know, commentary on what you brought us?
Yeah, can go over the basic idea of what we have.
Can you, any chance you can use the mic?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, just brought over this is the plan set that we, sorry about the whole big thing. You guys would like to take a look at it. So, I'll go over the basic concept of what we have for the intersection. The main goal was to make it flow a little bit better. We're gonna take 4th Street and shift it to the north. And we're gonna take the whole thing. We thought about leaving the curb on the south side to save a little bit of money to not shift the whole thing, but we would have ended up with 50-some feet wide, and then you would have cars that are stacking up in there when it's a red light. So we decided to shift the whole thing up. The old trophy shop / gas station is gonna be demolished. Plans have been submitted to MDOT and are working on getting the funds in now. So we made that deadline, which is a bit of a task in itself, MDOT had a couple extra hoops to jump through, so we were able to get that taken care of. Other than shifting the road up, it'll be kind of similar to what we did down at Redbud and Front Street and then up at Skyline and Front Street before. It'll be updating the signals, putting the cameras on so that it'll recognize cars better. Current issue up there is that motorcycles can't trick it, and you can't get it to recognize the motorcycles there if you're coming in on River Street. So it'll take care of that kind of an issue, and also the relocation will make it more like your typical four-way stop. Right now you have River Street that's on its own signal, 4th Street that's on its own signal, and Redbud. So then relocating and working through the programming with the signal, it'll be more like a four-way stop, so the whole thing will be more efficient. So that's our,
Commissioner Moore?
So are there old tanks, gas tanks that need to be extracted or something done with
yeah,
under the trophy house?
part of the city acquiring the right-of-way for that. Whiteman did a Phase 1 environmental assessment, and so then that's just looking at the documents from the state, and so they came through, I think, in the 80s.
Yep. The tanks were removed back in the 80s when there was a big push by the state to eliminate all abandoned in-ground tanks. So those were removed. We have the certificates in the file for that.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
Carla?
Are we going to have the push buttons for the pedestrians to get across the streets there?
Yep, yeah, it'll just be like either of those where it's not a
Okay.
real button that you hit, because it has to be so that you could hit it with a
Okay.
baseball
I kind of
bat and
assumed
it'll
you
keep
were,
ticking.
but I wanted to make sure.
Yep, yeah, it'll be all ADA accessible and have all the grades and everything to
Cool.
meet those guidelines.
Thank you.
Commissioner Baganski?
What is the real reason for taking that piece of property? Because nobody's really given us an answer. As a commissioner, I don't have any idea what accumulating that piece of property is actually going to do for that intersection.
Yeah, so shifting the road to the north to make it so that it lines up with River, so that we can come straight through. We just took a sliver of a corner and then have a grading permit, since we're gonna also shift Redbud over a little. But in order to get the right-of-way that we needed, we were impeding on that right-of-way already. So just taking that triangle out, which goes through that building, which in and itself is a blight to the community, and the owners also didn't want it. So then it worked out for both of us in that case that we could have that property. We'll eliminate that blight.
So you're going to eliminate that right turn lane then off of 4th Street on the Redbud? Or
No.
River Street?
No,
So you're still going to have 3 lanes,
coming off of River
east,
Street.
west, and then north?
We'll end up with, on 4th Street, I'm not sure if you can see it well, but we'll end up with a left turn lane.
I know the intersection well enough, I don't need to see
Yeah,
it.
but what we'll end up with the relocation is a right and through and a left turn lane, and then one that goes 4th Street westbound. River Street won't change anything, we're just gonna mill it and fill it back in, so that designated right lane will stay, and then you'll have your through and you'll have your left,
Okay.
just as you do now.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you very much.
Thanks.
ma'am. We
I brought an
appreciate-
extra set of plans if anybody else wanted to look.
Yeah, are you willing to stay after a little and meet with taxpayers? Okay,
Yeah,
great. Hey, thank you.
Yeah, these set of plans will remain here, so the clerk will have a set, and we'll have available for the public to view the plans that are present through Whiteman and what the state has to work from. Let's see. Okay, last comment I have is medical marijuana ordinance review. Again, in our ordinance, we have it that we will, on an annual basis, do a review of the ordinance and determine where and if we should improve it or alter it, change it. And we have had, in the last couple of weeks, pretty good staff discussion about that. We learned some things through this process that we want to improve upon. That will be presented to you here in a memo that, from our discussions that Deb has put together. I would, again, I think you have a copy of the memo to kind of outline our staff discussions. There are a couple of questions that are outstanding, I believe, in this, and one of them is in regard to the state's permitting what they call stacking for additional licenses at their level. That is a question, since we're doing the review, that we will be proposing to you. I would like to have a better opportunity, and I know you don't want to hear any more about work sessions, but Monday, the 17th, I'd like to have you consider having a work session to review the staff's memorandum here produced by Deborah that kind of outlines and streamlines what we found in the process that we would like to enhance and improve on, and then have some discussion on the questions that are also included in here. I don't know if Deb want to take make a couple of comments, or
Gotta see what my date is.
Go ahead. Can I go? Yes, go right ahead, sorry.
Sorry.
No, that's okay. I just, I'll be brief, but as you know, being involved in this process, and we know, I think when we started, we wanted to be very cautious, and we were, and we wrote a very good ordinance. So in addition to the requirement that we review the ordinance concerning the number, and also the issue of stacking has come up since we started, we identified a number of things that we felt should be changed as well. And so this memo, just briefly, I'll go through it. The changes that we're proposing from the staff perspective have to do with primarily the procedure. Most of the ordinance that we passed has the minimum operating standards for various types of medical marijuana facilities. We have not touched that language or proposed any changes. And I'll briefly go through these. For an example, under definitions, we want to add the definition of true party of interest. That's something that's in the state law, but it's not in their definitions. It is in their requirements for licensing, and it identifies who they will issue a state license to. And since we want to mirror them, we want to identify who we will issue a local permit to. So by adding this definition, then, if it's approved, we can go back through our permit process and change that language as well, and I think that will result in a lot of clarity for everyone, because some people would come to us with an LLC, some people would have different investors and stakeholders, and varying degrees of interest, some of which may qualify as a true party of interest and some that wouldn't. So this will allow us to be on the level with the state and ask basically the same information. The second proposed change would be, again, to consider allowing more than one grower permit at a location. And in our discussions, we felt that rather than just saying we would allow stacking, we wanted to have a measure of control over that, and based on an applicant's capability and capacity to actually accommodate additional license, we would like the opportunity to review that, and that's how come it says add, there's some proposed language there, and we would like to add that. And of course, we'll have to tweak everything. This is just, these are the points that we want to consider. Under Section 4, requirements for and procedure for issuing permits, the way that we wrote the ordinance, it said that the City Commission, basically, let me back up, it requires the clerk to send the application, the entire application to the planning commission to review and make a recommendation to the city commission. And in reality, the planning commission only needs to be involved in the special use application for zoning. And so we are proposing to strike that language, so basically change our procedure to eliminate that step. And then under, and you can, I'm not going to read all of this, but basically you can see all of these follow a common theme, so you'll see why we want to do that. In that same section, in section B, we also want to add language to include the special use application as a part of the medical marijuana facility permit application. If you recall, we had some discussion of who's on first and who does what when. So if we can require both to be submitted, then we'll have the permit, the city clerk can then hand off the special use part to myself as a zoning administrator, or whoever is the zoning administrator, and they can begin that process concurrently. So that's what we're trying to do. And then in section C, we wanted to strike some language again. One of the things would be sending the entire application permit to the city attorney. The other, again, removes the language and the requirement that we have to send the entire application to the planning commission. The reason that we wanted to strike the city attorney is not to leave them out of the process, but the state doesn't require a municipal review. And what we found is that we really needed the attorney available to answer our questions as a staff when we had a problem. And so we will keep that requirement in there, which you'll see a little bit later. Under item D in that same section, you'll see that we did just that. There was a requirement that the city attorney complete a detailed review. We'd like to strike that language and add that the city attorney has addressed any request for an opinion from the city staff or the commission, should you require one from him. And then under section E, we'd like to strike that in its entirety because we've already dealt with some of those issues and it's no longer necessary in our ordinance. And then finally, under number 6, permit application evaluation, that section deals with the review that you, the city commissioners, do. And again, to coordinate the changes that we've proposed, we would strike the language referred to it by the planning commission in A, so that you still shall assess all of the applications. And then under B, there are 13 items that you shall consider. And again, I just included that because as the city commission, you may want to tweak those a little bit yourself. That would be something that you would direct us to do. And so I just noted it here, and then there was a typo that I also noted. So those are, again, what we've proposed. Having a workshop will allow us to go through those things hopefully quickly and clearly for everyone's benefit. So I would be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Who was on this committee?
It's not, I would have a work session with the full city commission.
No, who was on this work session? Who was on this?
That was the city
city staff
created this.
City staff.
I ask again, who? Staff?
Be
which staff?
myself, comments that we had during the review process that involved the city clerk, the police department, and all the department heads.
Police department.
Fire, was fire involved too?
Yes, fire.
I'm sorry, yes.
police.
Yes.
Fire's involved, the treasurer is involved, the building official also has a chance to review.
So basically, all the people that were involved with the application process from the city standpoint, right? Before we would get the applications.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, police department, fire
That's not really
department,
what I
building
asked.
department.
Who put this right here together?
I did.
Thank you.
Oh, okay. All
Bill,
right.
what, can I
Dale?
ask?
Yeah, go ahead, Dale.
What time are you looking for the special meeting or session to go on the 17th?
I would suggest maybe October 17th, or excuse me,
September 17th.
September 17th, next Monday,
Yes.
What time?
at 7 o'clock.
You can do it earlier. I'm on vacation that week.
Okay, yeah.
6 o'clock.
Earlier's better for me and the other staff.
Will that work for you? You have to work.
If I can go earlier if you want, earlier, or is that, Pat, does that involve you then?
I'm just getting back from DC area, so 6 o'clock would be
Maybe.
probably okay, you know.
Got the hurricane coming out there.
All right, so 6 o'clock
Okay.
on the 17th.
6 o'clock on the 17th, is that right? Okay,
Okay, great, thank you.
thank you.
Thank you, Deborah.
Thank you.
Again, thank you, Deb. Again, this was Deb provided a little snapshot and a review of the memo that you have a copy of, and we'll be able to go line by line next Monday at 6 o'clock and review those staff recommendations. And
Would it be helpful for us to bring our own copies of our ordinance that we already have, so for comparison? Okay.
yes, that would be
Okay.
beneficial. Again, we created a significant ordinance as you look across the state of how other people have done their ordinances. We mirrored the state statute. I think it's worked pretty much well for us. We set the bar pretty high for these interested parties. I think it's kind of leveled out with the rush that we originally saw. The ordinance was cumbersome as it developed through the process, and the comments you see in this memo address some of those rough edges that we experienced. And it's not making this any easier, but it's more smoother for us to address those specific issues of the statute and ordinance. So again, we'll have that discussion next Monday. But you have any comments you want us
Okay,
to?
Commissioner Moore would like to ask something.
So these were changes that you came up with as you are starting the one-year review
Yes.
of what we've already done
Yep.
from last year.
Yes.
People that have been permitted, and this is the review. So, but the review is not complete, correct?
Right.
Because,
No, we have the work session and then.
but I mean, as far as individual people have not been reviewed, where they've been acknowledged that their review is totally okay with everybody, and because I know we put in a comment period for the public to be able to make comments.
Yep.
And I mean, I don't have a problem with a lot of these kind of changes, because it's really just the difference between the first time around versus the reviews time around.
Right.
It's a little bit worded differently, and that kind of thing has changed. But I do want to make sure that everyone remembers we have public input as part of this review process, so.
Yes. I mean, we'll, you know,
Okay.
that'll be, you know, anything that comes out of the work session that we all are comfortable with, and again, you will have that opportunity to help direct edit this document here, the starting point, this memo, ends up being in an introduction, and it results in a public hearing. So anytime you make any amendments to any ordinance, you have that public comment, public hearing opportunity.
But I'm referring to the individual review of each application.
They're not resubmitting applications, though.
All right, well, I guess we're working on the ordinance review now. Now, you're saying that, well, each individual, when their app comes up for review, there'll be a open session, so.
That's the way our ordinance reads now,
Okay.
so. I just wanting to know that this isn't getting, that part is not being overlooked. And
No,
in
they're,
reworking this, we will be having that opportunity
yeah.
to go back and look at each of these individual groups.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right.
That was my question.
Yeah,
Thank you.
So that's where we're at. One more thing, I know in the, moving on, unless there's any other comments about this, just in the briefing this last week, you were alerted to a sinkhole that we had at the intersection of Liberty Street and Rynearson. We tackled that today, and it's as we expected. When the Liberty project was done 20 years ago, nearly 20 years ago, they consistently put a round peg in a square hole, as I described it, and the round storm drain pipes were cut into the basins the hole for that receiver was cut in square, and the fabric, they just put fabric around the opening to try to prevent the washout of sand and soil that was packed around it. That's failed, and now we're getting some sinkholes up in that area. That's what we discovered today when we went in and we cut the road. I'm happy to say we only had about a 4-foot by 4-foot cut into the pavement to try to determine what was going on. And it was that case. We were able to hydro-cement the openings, backfilled it, packed it, and then we also filled in 2 catch basins that were there that didn't go anywhere. They were just kind of cistern type of basins that had already mostly filled in by themselves. They had been paved over in the past years. Wasn't serving any purpose, so we did fill those in. We repaired the main basin that everything flows into, and I'm happy to say that we were able to get that wrapped up just in today. So that was very good. We did under the new lead and copper standards, we did have to replace a supply line to a house on 4th Street. That was also in your briefing. We did complete that today. Went fairly smoothly. So that was a good thing. So we replaced the lead gooseneck that was on our side of the meter or the connection, and then we replaced the galvanized piping on the residence side with copper. And so they have a new service that we'll have to be looking for as we do continue to sample, do our required sampling for those situations in the community. So
Do we have to use copper?
it's probably the best known product for us to use. We're not that familiar with PEX. That's the new stuff. We don't have connections for PEX. We'd have to. We're kind of in the process of learning because we're going to have to install a lot of these.
There's no PVC being used anymore?
Not for water supply.
That's from, I'm sorry, Your Honor, but I'm trying to, you're talking the main supply from the meter into the house? Is that what you're talking
Yeah,
about? So that's only that short distance?
We have our connection, which is from the main to the shutoff.
Right, okay.
And that's in the tree lawn.
Right.
And then, so that's kind of what we maintain. And then normally from the shutoff to the house is always the property owner's responsibility. Back in, lots of years ago, a trend was to use galvanized pipe.
Okay, yeah.
Which is something the state wants to get removed from all systems across the state. So when we come across those and we have a galvanized situation on our side, they're requiring us to install a brand-new supply line into the home by 18 inches. That's if you read the article, I'm having a difficult time in that we're being dumped on, that's truly an unfunded mandate by the state, for us to have to pay for all those lines, as we find them. And we have, once we do our survey, as I said in the briefing, once we do our survey, and we get an idea where these are, we have to replace 5% of those lines over the next 20 years, 5% a year over the next 20 years. So that could be 40 to 80 supply lines we'll have to replace, starting in 2021 and for the next 20 years. We have to complete our surveys by 2020 and kind of to verify where we might have these situations. And if there's a higher percentage in a neighborhood, those are the neighborhoods we need to identify that we'll have to go in and replace supply lines. So it could get very expensive, depending on how we approach it. If we do it in-house, we'll keep the costs down. Won't hopefully not adversely affect water rates, but if we end up having to contract that work out, wow. City of Kalamazoo, they contract a supply line and it's $7,000. That's what they're paying for each of those lines. We can't afford that.
Commissioner Turney?
Just to kind of remind everybody, utilities is always an unknown factor. Since I worked for a utility for 30 years, what you don't see, you don't know. Unfortunately, when you do get in there and you see what the problem is, then the decisions have to be made and you have to make the corrections. The state of Michigan apparently has learned their lesson somewhat, but like you say, it's unfunded. That's something maybe you might want to write to your state representatives, because the city, if it has to replace quite a bit of the piping, which is from the street, it's like any riser meter, it's going to be costly.
We don't have that much of it though, do we?
Don't know yet. I don't think we don't.
We believe we have 3 neighborhoods now that are really developed along that era where galvanized was used exclusively. So there may be nearly 700 supplies in those 3 neighborhoods that.
Most of them are what, about 30-foot long?
They're, yeah, 30 to 40 foot long is what the average is. There are a few that are set back, but majority of them are 30 to 40 foot in length. And this morning, we bored the line in. We were able to excavate a hole at our valve, and within 20 minutes, the line was bored right into the house, and we made our connections on the copper that we're most familiar with, and boy, we had them hooked up fairly quickly. But and so we don't have the capability of boring. Not that it's something we couldn't address in the future. We used a local contractor who basically was very reasonable with us in the fact that he did it for nothing, just to understand what it's going to take to do these in the future. So we'll have a sample, an idea of how to budget for these lines in the future. And I will say, and I included in my briefing, that the new standards are being realized by all communities across the state, and there is a huge outpouring of anger at the state for what they produced. And I believe out of that, we will get some litigation that will kind of balance this responsibility out between the state, the local, and the property owner. So, you know, where that's all going to come about, we don't know. But I believe in the next, we don't have to really start replacing them until 2021. Again, we survey up to 2020. So in between now and then, I think this is going to change a little bit. At least I hope the responsibility is going to be balanced out a little bit more. because we're looking at a significant undertaking of the type of supplies we have in this community.
Anyone else have a question about that? Commissioner Attorney?
Bottom line is, until you get the survey, you won't know where you're at. You have to not only, you have to notify your state representatives of what the cost would be for your city or all the cities that are in the state of Michigan, not just Berrien County or city of Buchanan. We won't get the final total until, like Bill says, we get the survey. And if we have a lot of them, then it has to be changed. It's as simple as that. Unless the laws are changed in Lansing. So it's an expensive measure because when the pipes go by the foot, and the longer the replacement, the higher it's going to cost until you get to that riser. So, and unfortunately, that's where we're at.
Mayor, that's all I've got.
Okay, great. With that, we'll move on to commissioner comments. This evening, we'll start with Commissioner Cole.
I just want to say I hope that everyone had a good Labor Day weekend. It's kind of sad now. It makes winter on its way, so be prepared. I want to remind you to watch out for the kids now that school's back in session. I know I say this every year, but it's so important to watch for those little kids out there. I thought the sport flags that are up downtown look fantastic. I love that. To be able to get our kids' pictures up there and with their sport on there, I think that's really nice. I'm so glad that that is happening. Dave Mitchell left. I wanted to say thanks to him for all that he has done for our community. He has always done a great job with the 9/11 ceremony. He does a fantastic job. And that's all I have.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Moore?
I want to thank my colleagues on the Tin Shop Board for their nice presentation and congratulate them on their coming year of leadership together. And I would encourage everyone to attend the play I ushered on Saturday. The August Osage County was very intense. It is definitely for adults. There's a lot of language that is not good, but it's also something you hear on HBO and all that stuff, so it's not like anything we haven't heard. But the performances were really amazing, and they're, once again, not just our own local people that you see every time, but we have many, many actors now coming from other theaters seeking to be part of our productions. So our reputation is growing. As you can see, we're very proud of our group, and we're looking forward to sharing the experience with the community. So please keep live theater going. Come to the plays. That's all I have.
Great. Thanks, Commissioner Moore. Commissioner Attorney?
Thanks, Your Honor. Just remind everybody that the farmers market is coming to an end pretty soon. There's only a couple weeks left in their season, so make sure you get out to the farmers market the next couple Saturdays. Also, the Planning Commission is meeting tomorrow night at 5:30. This gives you enough time to get to the 9/11 ceremonies at the Commons. That's all I have, Your Honor.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Viganski?
Yeah, I just got a question. I don't know if the clerk puts the minutes online, but there hasn't been any put up since July the 7th. I'd like to know if the mayor is still going to go to Grand Rapids or if she's going to pass on that. Maybe let Dale go.
No, I'm not going to Grand Rapids.
Thank you. And then I wanted to make something very clear about the charter, 4.11. It's always been said that commissioner has no right to talk to city employees, but except for the purpose of inquiry. They never really want to say that down here. I just wanted to make that perfectly clear. And then, Norma, you asked a question about a while back before we hired our new clerk, and this is no reflection on the clerk, but you were told that the commission has nothing to do with hiring anyone but the city manager and the city treasurer. One of our commissioners was on the interview committee, so she was directly involved in hiring our clerk. And then as far as the lawyer, I talked to the lawyer once during the marijuana session. My first question to the lawyer was, how much do you charge, and do you charge immediately? So I don't know where they get off thinking I'm talking to the lawyer unless they're referring to the letters I got from him in May, which I got 4 of. I still wouldn't talk to him. I talked to the prosecuting attorney. So when they did their little motion here, supposedly putting a gag order on me, all they did was infuriate me, and I'm gonna go about this a lot different. I'd like to know when the charter was last overhauled. Other than that, I'm happy. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And I just want to say for the record, it's not a gag order. It's just not contacting city employees according to our charter. I have a family emergency, so I will not be making any comments this evening, and I would appreciate a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor? Aye. Aye, thank you.